Hey, good evening, everybody. Happy 235th Coast Guard birthday. My name is Todd DiPastino. This is the Veterans Breakfast Club, and tonight we are commemorating or celebrating the Coast Guard's birthday. You could make the argument that the Coast Guard, when this country was founded, and I'm talking about after the United States Constitution was ratified, that the United States Coast Guard was the most, wasn't called the Coast Guard then, but was the most important branch of service. It might be the strangest branch of service. Ida May, I saw her gasp. I saw Ida May gasp at that. I don't mean that that's a criticism. I'm looking for Coast Guard. So we have Ida May. She is a Coast Guard spouse. Dale refuses to get on camera, I'm sure, but I think he's probably just off camera. We have Jimmy Jones, who I haven't seen in years. Jimmy, good to see you. You are a career, I think, at least 35 years in the Coast Guard. We may have other Coast Guard veterans here. So, for example, I see Daniel Trachtenberg, who doesn't normally join us. He might be a Coast Guard veteran. Dennis Randall, or you go right. Dennis is with us. He's Coast Guard. Lewis McDonald, you have to be Coast Guard, right? We can't hear you. You could shake your head yes or no. Oh, he is. He is. Okay. Yes, you are Coast Guard. Okay. So we're going to talk to our Coast Guard vets about what makes the Coast Guard special, unique. Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Hey, Mike. It was good. Mike, I didn't recognize you with the hat on. It's good to see Lisa and Mike. Mike's lieutenant commander or commander. Good to see you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. So we have wonderful Coast Guard veterans here. How you doing, Mike?
Good, very good.
Thank you for joining us.
Jim Jones had asked if I was going to jump on, and I actually had a work commitment tonight that got sort of canceled, so I was able to jump on. So glad I could participate.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Good. Yeah, this is your hour to shine. Before we get into our Coast Guard conversation, I do want to let people know we have a really special program coming up on Thursday. That's Thursday, August 7th at 7 p.m. This is the theme, Escape from Dachau. We're going to be focusing on Dachau concentration camp. Glenn Flickinger and I will be leading a tour group to Dachau. We're going to be leaving for 2 weeks, battlefield tour of World War II of Europe, and Dachau will be part of the itinerary toward the end of the tour. And this program that we have coming up on Thursday night is going to feature stories from Dachau and other concentration camps. Glenn, do you want to let people know kind of what we're in for here on Thursday night?
Yeah, it's come together incredibly well. It started with the book Escape from Dachau, which there it is. Kathy Mueller Slonim is the daughter of two of her father was arrested and put in Dachau in 1938, and it's the story of how he managed to escape. Okay. It's also the story leading up to his imprisonment, if you will, at Dachau. He was Jewish businessman, incredibly successful Jewish businessman, an incredibly highly decorated veteran of World War I for the German army. So it may be, without giving away too much, the single most courageous story I've ever read about World War II as to how he got out of Dachau.
That's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, I read the book. It's not a long book, but you can't put it down once you start. So, Susan Service is going to be on to walk us through that. She is the granddaughter of those people. And then we're having, through Scott Masters, our great friend up in Canada, who's been so helpful lately. This man, Nate, I'm going to say Leipziger, who is a Holocaust survivor, Auschwitz, I believe, and then Dachau subcamps, not Dachau itself. Okay. I've only read a little bit about his story, but just reading about it is compelling. And Scott is going to walk us through his experience with Nate on. And then we're going to finish with a man we've had on before, and that's Hilbert or Hibby Margol, member of the 42nd Division, the Rainbow Division, who was there for the liberation of Dachau. So we're going to cover Dachau. I got a little bit of history I'm going to give. Dachau was the first concentration camp created by the Nazis in 1933. So a little bit of the history of Dachau, and then these three stories from these three people. We may go 3 hours. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite some program. Thank you, Glenn, for putting it together. And thank you to Scott Masters, really, for referring these wonderful Holocaust survivors, veterans, and others to us all the time. Thank you very much, Scott. What a program that is. And again, that'll be Thursday night, August 7th at 7 p.m.
Got it.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Let's talk about the Coast Guard. I'm a little curious. The Coast Guard, one of the things that makes the Coast Guard strange, or maybe unique, is it's the smallest branch of service. I mean, really small. It's like 42,000 active duty members, which is tiny. The Army is 10 times that number. So the other branches really aren't, are way bigger. The Navy 8 times more than the Coast Guard. It's also the only branch of service that's not under the Department of Defense. That makes it unusual. So I'm going to ask our vets here who are in the Coast Guard why they chose the Coast Guard. And let me start with Lewis. Let's start with you, Lewis McDonald. How are you, Lewis?
Good. How are you?
Good. Where are you?
Birmingham, Alabama.
So you're Birmingham. Do you know Jimmy Jones?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Because he seemed to know you. Okay. I just saw when I asked, is Lewis McDonald a Coast Guard veteran? Jimmy nodded yes. So like as if he knew who you were. But tell me, when did you serve in the Coast Guard?
1966 to 1970.
And why did you join the Coast Guard?
Well, I wanted to join the Army or the Marines, but my father was smarter than me and said he'd only sign for the Navy, Coast Guard, or Air Force because he said I'd go to Vietnam. So I joined the Coast Guard and went to Vietnam. But
Oh, not to laugh. I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah.
Yeah, he accused me of volunteering, but I didn't. I was on a 255, and it was, it's like somebody said, "Did you see any combat?" And I said, "Just enough to do me."
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that he was so wise, and I feel, sorry for the guys. I mean, we went in and rescued couple of pilots and some Army guys upriver and things like that. And I felt sorry for them, but, I have, it was a great experience, and it was an eye-opening experience, and the Coast Guard helped me grow up because I went to school after I got out for 7 years at night on weekends because I realized that I did need an education and training. And, but it was great. I enjoyed it. I'd do it all over again. And I still keep in touch with probably 15, 20 guys.
Lewis, I think people are surprised sometimes to hear that the Coast Guard served in Vietnam.
Yep.
Can you describe a little bit? Tell me how many were there and what was your mission?
Well, it's my understanding that there were over 8,000 total, and there were 2 squadrons that were afloat. Squadron 1, of course, being the 82-footers, and we were in Squadron 3, and it was anything from probably a 311 down to a 255. And we went from Pensacola, Florida to there. So in 69, we put a little over 65,000 miles on the old girl, and she served us well. And but we did a lot of gunfire support. for the Naval Gunfire Support, and we did a lot of boardings, and we did some humanitarian visits into villages and and orphanages, and our medical doctor would go along and work on people and help them, and but it was a good experience. 82 footers and the Navy's swift boats came alongside a lot for resupply and a little, sometimes a little R&R, and but it was interesting, and it was I was a quartermaster, and my main job at all the different close quarters, I was on the wheel and got a lot of experience steering the ship for resupply and unrep and receiving ammo and fuel and whatnot. And anytime we docked or were in a channel, so um, it was a real good experience, and I would do it all over again.
That's amazing. Could you explain to some of our Army folks here what a quartermaster is in the Coast Guard and the Navy?
Well, a quartermaster in the Coast Guard is a combined rate. I went to signalman school at Newport, Rhode Island, graduated, and went to quartermaster school at the Navy schools. In the Coast Guard, it's combined. In the Navy, it's two rates, signalman and quartermaster. But mainly our job is navigation and maintaining charts and steering the ship and whatnot. But
So in the Navy and the Coast Guard, a quartermaster is more in the navigator or navigation. And in the Army,
correct.
it's providing clothing and socks and boots and keeping people supplied.
Yeah, in the Army, it was what our storekeepers did.
Right.
We had in the Coast Guard and the Navy, of course, storekeepers took care of that, but we had nothing to do with anything above the main deck except quarter deck watches in port and then at sea watches when we were underway.
Louis, was there anything that the Coast Guard, you as a Coast Guardsman, could do in Vietnam that the other branches couldn't do? I mean, I know, for example, the Coast Guard here locally or domestically is tasked with, you can make arrests at sea. You could do law enforcement. Did you have that kind of mission, or was it pretty much you were an auxiliary to the Navy?
Well, we did board, and I know that the Navy has Coast Guard personnel on board with them when they board ships now, and I'm not sure that the Navy did much boarding, but we did when we were in Vietnam, and I don't recall ever seeing a Navy destroyer or anything of that size boarding any of these small boats.
Right.
Mainly we were asked to come there to stop the smuggling of arms and personnel from North Vietnam. And
Exactly.
it worked out real well.
Yes, you guys were patrolling the funneling of weapons and materiel, not down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but down in the rivers and deltas and
Yeah.
coastline. Right.
We started out in Da Nang and we went all the way around into Cambodia.
I'm going to invite everybody, if you want to ask a question, please do. I know you're putting them in the chat and comments too. This is kind of open conversation with Coast Guard veterans. That's how we're conceiving this. Dennis Randall, I'm going to go to you next. When did you join the Coast Guard?
I joined the Coast Guard in 1973. I enlisted, was also a quartermaster, was sent to Alaska, and I was stationed on board buoy tenders. I was on the Coast Guard cutter Plane Tree, and the Sweetbriar. And then after that, I went to OCS, and because I actually had gone to college before I enlisted, and in OCS was stationed at I think it was the 5th District office in Norfolk, Virginia, and had a desk job. I hated that. Looked for a way out, and finally ended up going to what they called ship salvage diving officer training, and was stationed on board the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Westwind, which is icebreaker out of Milwaukee.
Well,
So
hold on.
I'm
hold
probably one of the only hard hat divers you'll ever run into.
So you were a diver.
Yep.
Wow. And what do you mean hard hat diver?
Mark V hard hat. That's the surface applied air. You've seen the pictures. I don't know if you can see this or not. There.
I love it. Hold on. I'm gonna
Yeah, here you go. So yeah, I had this done when I turned, I'm trying to find out where the camera is. There it is. Had this done when I turned 65, just because I was looking back and saying,
oh
you know,
my gosh.
I really enjoyed that. So yeah, Mark V hard hat, surface applied air. I was also trained as a salvage officer. The Westwind actually went aground, and I was the salvage officer in charge of getting us off the reef. There you go. That's that brings back some memories.
That's insane, Dennis. I mean, no offense.
No, you're right. It was insane.
I mean, did you think it was like this a great adventure? Were you ever scared when you were in one of those things? I mean, ugh.
Well, one of the thing that I liked about the Coast Guard was how professional that they were. I had actually had Coast Guard come out and get me in a sailboat one time when my engine wouldn't work, and I just really admired them for how professional and courteous and nice they were. And it was amazing. So when it came time for me to decide which military I wanted to go into, I didn't want to be drafted, and I said, I'll take the Coast Guard, thanks. And I loved being in the buoy tenders, but they kept pushing me because I had a degree, and they really wanted me as an officer.
Yeah.
So I finally said okay, and went to OCS. And then they gave me a desk job. They took me out of the boats, and it's like, it's like I didn't like that at all.
Right.
So I really was looking for something else, so that I didn't have a huge desire to be a diver. That was not my intention. Although I was good at snorkeling, and I lived in California, so I've always been in the ocean. So it's like, yeah, I can probably do that, And sure enough, I used, after I got out, I taught scuba for about 3 years, managed a dive shop. It changed my life. It really did.
Changed your life. It redirected your life. How long were you in the Coast Guard?
Just 5.5 years.
Okay, so the Coast Guard got enough value out of you, I would say. I mean, it sounded like they wanted to, give you more training, and did they try to entice you to make a career out of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, honestly, I probably should have stayed.
Yeah.
But at the time, the reason that I got out was I was having some marital problems.
Yeah.
My wife was having our second child and I was in Milwaukee. She went back to California to be with her mom, and it didn't look like she was ever going to come to Milwaukee. So I took the opportunity at that time to leave.
And, not to pry, but did the marriage have a happy ending? Were you able to stay together?
We stayed together 20 years.
Okay.
So,
that's good.
that was a good long time. We didn't break up right then. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, Dennis, I think that's probably the best reason to separate from the military is family. It's so hard to keep a family together. We hear it. We've been doing the Veterans Breakfast Club since 2008. We've just heard story after story about the difficulties, the pressures, the tensions that military service puts on a family.
What's really funny about that is that my wife really enjoyed it when I was enlisted. She got along with the enlisted wives, and she did really well. But when I became an officer, it was like a step up, and she really wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. She becomes an officer's wife, and that's a whole different role.
Yeah.
Justin Miller, you have a question or a comment?
I have a question for Dennis. The Mark V, was that the bronze helmet or system, or was that the old steel?
Well, it's actually spun copper.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the one that you see, all polished up and looking really nice. The reality is that we never kept them that shiny. It was impossible because the second you put them in the water, they turn dark.
You had to get a patina on them.
Yep, exactly.
Second question
yeah.
was how much difference did you ever dive with the older version?
Well, I was with the Mark V, so I never dove with anything other than that. I did also dive with what they call the Kirby Morgan bandmast, which is a little bit different. It's not as heavy, didn't require as many weights. Something that you can tuck away in your interesting facts that I know now. That entire suit weighs 200 pounds.
Oh,
So just standing up and walking with it on, is crazy.
200 pounds.
Yeah. And at the time I was in fighting condition, I was like 230, 6'2", 230. And so I had a combined weight of like 430 pounds. So stand up and move that around, climb a ladder after being underwater for 4 or 5 hours.
Dennis, that reminds me, this is an aside. I was, my wife and I were having dinner. We were, reading over the news, and I saw an article about a back to school article, and it said, it is unhealthy, say doctors, for a student, a teenager, a high school student, to carry a backpack that's more than 15% of their body weight. And I laughed out loud, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to tell these guys tonight about this. I mean, because 200 pounds, that's something to have to walk around in.
The other one is, Dennis, do we still have hard hat divers in the service?
We have surface supplied air divers because nobody now is training on the Mark V, and all of the subsequent dive gear, to my understanding, has all been lightweight. Doesn't require the same type of suit or all the weights. So no, we don't have hard hat divers.
Okay. The other was, I wanted to agree with you on the wife thing. As I was getting rifted out of the service in '83, I got married, and there was no way she would become an officer's wife.
So tell me, Justin, why? What were the expectations for an officer's wife in those days?
Well, it's sort of like a hierarchy. As I was a captain, she's at captain level, and all the other wives maintain their husband's rank. Wow. And unless you were in the right group, and we were a pretty good group. We were the Honest John Rocket Battalion out of Fort Hood, so it was a little closer knit group than most, but it was still a hierarchy. She came from civilian as a real estate consultant at Fort Hood for a while. Well, that when I got rifted, she was so happy she bought me a bottle of champagne.
Dennis, how deep were you able to dive?
300 feet was the on air. We also had advanced training that I could have taken, but I did not, and the Coast Guard really wouldn't want me to. That would have done mixed gases that could have gone deeper, but 300 feet was plenty.
Mm. And Dennis, where are you joining us from?
Carlsbad, okay. California.
I was going to say, I hope you're near the ocean somehow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't imagine that you living apart from the ocean. Let me go to Jimmy Jones. Hi, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
I wear a headset now, and I'm not perfect, but I can hear you pretty good.
Jimmy, I think you are our senior Coast Guard veteran here. How many years did you serve in the Coast Guard?
Okay, my first enlistment was 1966 to 70, same as Lewis, In fact, that Coast Guard cutter that you showed on Zoom, I actually was on that ship as the Barataria. We shot the very first support shot in May of 1967, and I was the fellow that fed the shell up the upper handling room. So that's I was the first. That's what I did. Anyway, yeah, it was. Yeah, that's me. There I am. That's a dummy shell. I just use that for just for picture. But
So hold on. What ship is this, Jimmy?
What's that?
What ship?
I was on the Barataria,
Barataria.
and you showed it on here when Lewis was there.
Okay.
I was on that. That is the Barataria, and we shot the very first support shot, and I was in the upper handling room. But anyway, my first tour of duty was 66 to 70. And then I got out for 11 years as a Port Authority bus driver. And I got a recruiter got on my bus down in downtown Pittsburgh back in 1981. We started talking about the Coast Guard, and he talked me into coming back in. So I was in from 81 to 2007 when I retired. My last 4 years, I was on what they call Title 10. It was active duty in the Coast Guard Reserves. I spent down in Port Arthur, Texas, those 4 years, and interesting career. In fact, when I came back to Pittsburgh and actually retired in MSU Pittsburgh, and I have that's me. I was a BMC, which is a chief postmate, and I don't know if you have the picture, but there's a retirement picture of myself, Dave Bell, and Mike Advantage.
Oh, I don't know if I have that. I don't think I do. I have one with your brother,
That's my
and your
brother.
brother's on here. Now, your brother Larry, he's on this program. Larry, he's the older brother?
Yeah, we're 2 years older than I am.
2 years older. Larry was Army.
Pardon me?
Larry was in the Army.
Yes, he was in. I almost talked him into joining the Coast Guard, but he said he didn't want to do 4 years. So he ended up in the Army for 2.
And why did you join the Coast Guard?
I joined the Coast Guard, to be honest with you. I didn't want to get drafted in the Army. And I was supposed to join the Air Force, but I lost track of my paperwork. So I looked at, if anybody's familiar with the federal building downtown Pittsburgh, there's a little room off to the side, and there's a Coast Guard recruiter was in there. And I told him, I said, I just got my draft physical today, and I'm A1, which means you're gone as soon as they can grab you. And he said, let me give you a test. So he did. He says, you score well, I'll get you in 3 weeks. He said, normally there's an 8-month waiting list to get in the Coast Guard. And he got me in 3 weeks, believe it or not. So that was interesting.
And where did you go with the Coast Guard then, between 67 and 70? 66 and 70?
What was that again?
Where did you go with the Coast Guard? Where did the Coast Guard send you?
Oh, after when I got out of boot camp, 1966, I was in Papa 62. That was the number of my country. They gave me orders to the Coast Guard cutter Barataria up in Portland, Maine. And during that time, I pulled a couple ocean stations I didn't care about. And they gave us orders to go to Vietnam. So I say, okay, see something different. It'll be interesting. And that was an interesting tour of duty in Vietnam. Came back, and they put me on the Coast Guard cutter Cape Horn, which is a 95-foot patrol boat. And I did a lot of search and rescue out of Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And then after I made second-class boatswain, they needed a boat coxswain over in Station Woods Hole, which is just you walk off the gangplank off the Cape Horn and you're at the station. So I got qualified on all the small boats, 44-foot motor lifeboat, 40-foot UTV boat, and 44s weren't very fast, but they were interesting to ride. I mean, if you ever watched, what was that on 60 Minutes one day, they did that.
It rolled over.
I did that surfing school out in California, what was that, out in Oregon or Washington? Where's it at? I think it's out in Washington or Oregon. Anyway, yeah, I hit a lot of seas like that out there in Buzzards Bay up in Massachusetts. Interesting ride. just make sure you got yourself strapped in just in case. That's a 95 footer.
Okay, so that's not the Cape Horn, it's the Cape Fox, I think, or Cape Newigan.
That's a Cape Newigan. Okay, I was on the Cape Horn 95322 out
Okay.
of Boston, Massachusetts.
That looks like a small boat. How many people? What's the complement?
Well, we had a crew of 13.
Okay, so it is small.
Yeah, it's small. And, I did a tour of Vietnam. The whole tour was 1967. Never got seasick the whole time over and the whole time back. But that 95 footer, that'll really rock your boat. You have to get used to riding that thing because you'll be feeding the fish on that one.
Okay, Jimmy, tell us about your tour of Vietnam. What was your mission? What did you do?
Okay, I was seaman boatswain striker, and it's general quarters. So what they do is it's up to the deck officer to assign everybody their GQ billet. So I got assigned to the upper handling room, and what I did in the upper handling room was when they brought the shells up from the lower handling room, I hand them to you, put in the hoist, you slam the hoist, and the shell goes up. And it's a real touchy job because if you don't have your fingers just right closing that hoist, your finger's going to go up with the shell. And they actually asked me if I would do that because a lot of guys they kept saying, "I want to keep my fingers." So I mean, I was good at it. We did a lot of that's me with Chief Bill Heelan, great guy. He ended up retiring down in Florida as a CW04. I don't know if anybody else remembers him, but he retired out down there in Westfield, Florida. That's where he retired to. Great guy. He actually talked me in to striking bosun mate because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to go to dental technician school, a couple of different schools I wanted to go to, but he says, Jonesy, he says, strike bosun mate, I get to third class as soon as we get back, and that's what happened. I took the third class test on the way back to the West Coast, and by the time I got back to Portland, I was a BM3.
Okay, Jimmy, I'm going to ask you to walk us through all this stuff you have on. You have this oversized helmet to accommodate the headphones, right?
Yes.
And that's why you lost your hearing, correct?
I lost my hearing from being in the upper handling room because back then you didn't have hearing protection.
Right.
And now people wear earplugs and stuff. Back then you didn't, because you had to hear the orders from the chief. He barks out a set of orders, and then somebody else barks out a set of orders, and you got to do bang, bang, bang to get those shells up. Yeah, I lost my hearing in the upper handling room. That's
that'll do it.
a lot of singing over.
And then this, Jimmy, this microphone, is this a sound activated microphone?
Pardon me again?
The microphone, tell me about it.
This one here is during a refueling with a Navy AO. That's who fueled us off the coast of Vietnam. And you do different. That is called a sound-powered phone.
Okay.
And I had comms with the bridge.
Okay.
Up on the bridge at the time. I can't remember. And underneath that big helmet, everybody calls that the Star Wars helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have earphones. You hear up there in the bridge, but you talk through the mic. What you do is there's a button on the top of that where you're talking to. There's a button.
Okay.
Push that button down, and that's how they hear you. It's all sound powered.
Sound powered. So, Jimmy, what is this thing? What is this like aluminum or stainless steel looking item?
Which one's that?
What is this thing here? The little cylinder that's on your shoulder.
Activated light.
That is, if you go overboard, that is a flashlight. The water will activate that.
The water will activate it.
Yeah, it'll flash. I mean, it's more. The things they have now is a lot better.
Right.
Than we had, but
did you always wear a life preserver or life vest, or was it just when you were in general quarters?
Oh no, I didn't wear a life jacket during down quarters because I was underneath. And I
Okay.
needed, you saw that picture of me, you need to be able to move and shift things around. Yeah, when you refuel,
Okay.
um, everybody topside has a PFD on.
Got it.
Those are the old-fashioned ones. You have to strap them underneath your legs and underneath. I mean, there's like 12 straps you gotta.
Right. Right.
They give you 3 minutes to do it. That's me on the bow of the Coast Guard cutter Barataria.
Hmm.
This Seaman Filio, which is to the right of me, he's wearing a sound power phone. I was just up there to talk to him, and somebody took my picture. Unfortunately, here's a sad story about Seaman Filio. When we got back from Vietnam, he passed away in a car accident in New Hampshire a month later.
A month after. Oh boy.
There's me there with the PFD, and let's see, there's the flashlights on there.
Yep.
And let's see what else I got on there. Let's see, I'm wearing my watch. I don't know why. That's my Timex watch.
Let me. Oh,
ready
here's another. Here's a good one.
Here I am standing helm watch, because as a part of the deck force, you got to stand sea watches. So you're on watch 4 hours out of 8. So you do 4 hours, 8 hours off. You go back on 4 hours, and that rotates. The hours rotate, but yeah, I was standing helm watch, and this Craig Beck, he was a quartermaster. There's the quartermasters in here. Craig Beck was a quartermaster. You can see him right to the right of me. He was a QM3, and the fellow in the front is the messenger. Because on an underway watch on a Coast Guard cutter, you have a messenger, a helmsman, and a lookout. The lookout's up on the top. And where's that tube at? Here's a tube here. See the tube right in
Oh
front?
yeah. Sure.
Call down and says, Bridge, I got a contact bearing 010 7 miles out or something like that. Then they'll look for them on the radar. But most of the times the radar picks them up before the lookout does. Let's see, what's that? Is that? I'm looking at this picture. I keep trying to make out what that is.
Yeah, I think this is part of your collection here. It looks like a.
Interesting career. And then when I went back in the reserves, when 9/11 happened, that was part of my active duty in Pittsburgh.
Here you go. Yeah.
And let's see.
This is you here.
Michael Flynn, he's to the right of me. I'm in the middle top. Michael Flynn, he turned out to be worked for the Pittsburgh City Police. And Michael Monsoor lives in front of me. He's now a real estate agent, sells real estate. But
So Jimmy, this is after 9/11. What was your mission then?
in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
we patrolled the rivers because what happened is they wanted to make sure that when they were towing these fuel barges up and down the river, there wasn't anybody, that wasn't supposed to be around the area looking to maybe sabotage or shoot at the fuel tankers. We had a boat in front of the fuel tanker and a boat in back of the fuel tanker, and we would just escort them from one lock, like the Emsworth lock. We were going to escort them through town until they got through the next lock, was usually down on the Monongahela River somewhere. Yeah, we had to escort them through the city because they didn't want anything crazy happen in the city, something going off, and then you'd have a lot of. It would be a big mess. So yeah,
I'm going to show one more picture here of you. Here's a great retirement picture. Will work for anchors.
Okay, here's the story with that photo. Of course, that's the wrong anchor. That's a Navy anchor. I was Coast Guard. But anyway, when I got down to Port Arthur, Texas, I went down. I was a chief petty officer. I went down there. They found out that I was never initiated as a chief petty officer, and that's a big deal in the Navy and the Coast Guard. They want all the E7s to be initiated as a chief petty officer. So that is part of my initiation. They got these. they squirted, when you walk, you had to crawl through this little tunnel and they were squirting with that foam. That's what that foam was. It was all over me. And that costume was mine. Every E7 had to make their own costume. And it was interesting. It was an interesting this thing because you had to have a hat box. I made a hat box. You had to do a charge book. And I spent 3 weeks doing all this before I even got initiated. So it was interesting.
So Ray Brendel here asks, I'll ask for him, aside in the chat, aside from the boarding duties mentioned earlier, how did the Coast Guard's mission in Vietnam differ from that of the Brown Water Navy? It's a good question.
You do a lot of boardings and Sometimes we sent a small boat over to one of the villages. They might have a medical issue. Somebody in the village has a medical issue, and the Coast Guard send somebody over real quick. I don't know if you still have that picture. I have a picture. I was in a Vietnam village. It was actually Antoy. And the hospital corpsman with me, his name was Wagner. I gave him my camera. I said, take a picture of me with this kid on my shoulder. So by the time I got the kid on my shoulder, there was 20 kids from the village all standing around me, and that's me took the picture. And I've posted that picture on Facebook a few times, and of course, you can't tell it was me because I have black hair.
Right. How great. How great. I want to ask Bob Von Bargen. I'm sorry, Bob. Jimmy is not the senior Coast Guard veteran in the group. Bob Von Bargen is, because Bob, how old are you?
On the 4th of July, I turned 90.
You turned 90 on the 4th of July. And we know you as we know you, Bob, as an Air Force navigator. But before you were an Air Force navigator, you were in the Coast Guard Reserve at 17 years old?
Yes, indeed. And
how did that come about?
I hear all the noble talk here of why they joined the Coast Guard. I have to say that I joined the Coast Guard Reserve because I was dating this absolutely beautiful girl, and her father was a commander in the Coast Guard Reserve, and he said to me, Bob, you should be in the Coast Guard Reserve. Now, what would a pure, great, dedicated American patriot do at a moment like that? And I'll tell you what, I treasure every moment that I spent in the Coast Guard. It pained me to switch because I really loved the Coast Guard, but the Air Force gave me an opportunity to fly and become commissioned. And so when I reached the Advanced Corps ROTC, I was transferred into the inactive Air Force Reserve, and then I was commissioned when I graduated from college. But the Coast Guard is a wonderful organization, and as I said, I treasure every minute. And I'm shocked at some of the questions that are here in the chat. The Coast Guard is a viable, hardworking operation, and someone wrote in here, did they ever lose a ship? They did all in World War II. They did all the convoy work. One ship, I think it was the Escanaba, was lost with all hands except one. The operation at D-Day at Omaha Beach was a Coast Guard LCI operation. The Navy was secondary, and the Coast Guard needs a good PR man.
I tell you, Bob, here's where I'm going to make a confession. When the Veterans Breakfast Club started, and I really think this was 2008, 2009, a man came up to me in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, and he said, I was in World War II. And I said, what branch of service? He said, the Coast Guard. And I asked this, I said, what did the Coast Guard do in World War II? I stood in the same spot for the next 45 minutes as he told me. What the Coast Guard did in World War II, and I'll never forget it. And it was because of that I kind of followed up. Well, what was the Coast Guard's role then in Korea and in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan? I think even Afghanistan, strangely enough, a landlocked country, there was a role for the Coast Guard. You're right. Because of the small branch of service, because they're usually seen as an auxiliary to the Navy during times of war, it doesn't get the publicity. Did you go to boot camp, Coast Guard boot camp?
I went to boot camp at Cape May in 1953.
And what was that like?
Was a great experience. I learned a lot. The Coast Guard has so many functions. It deals in so many areas, and we had to learn all the different functions. And then I was in New York City in a port security unit in 40-foot patrol boats on the Hudson River and the East River, and then one time we went to Philadelphia. And operated in the Philadelphia waters. But it was really interesting. As a matter of fact, the 40-foot patrol boats, if you've got a minute, I can tell you, right? You know, all these dedicated, this is a humorous story about the coxswain, the boatswain's mates that ran the 40-foot patrol boats in New York. They were a wild bunch. They were like fighter pilots in the Air Force. And one day we left Pier 9 and the East River, which is down near where the ferry boat comes in. And we started up the East River underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, and passed by the Williamsburg Bridge. And there's a park, and it was dark. It was at night. And these guys were devils. And they ran these ships. You wouldn't believe what they did with them. But anyway, we're in the middle of the river, and all of a sudden he turns the boat, and he heads it right into the shore, running at full speed at night, and he's got all the lights out. And I said, what is this guy doing? And we're running up, and the engine is screaming away as we got, I thought for sure we were going to hit the rocks, at which point he put the engines in full reverse. Now we're backing up into our own wake, and the ship, the boat's going like so. He turned the lights on, and he put the horn on. He was going whoop, 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 whoop. The lights were going up and down. And if you looked over into the park, you saw dressed, semi-dressed, and undressed people running all over the place.
That does sound like
they had a great sense of humor.
That is so great. Ida May, I'm going to ask you to speak for Dale. Tell us about, how are you, Ida May, first of all?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing well. How is Dale? I know he had knee replacement recently. How's he doing?
Well, he doesn't think he's doing real well, but he's actually ahead of time as far as his physical therapy, and he's driving. He walks with a cane, and he's walking about over a quarter of a mile a day besides doing his physical therapy.
Okay.
And he's able to use a stationary bike now. So,
okay.
And he's still in some pain, but
good. And I will be seeing you and him at our breakfast in Beaver on Wednesday.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Dale is Amish, so he doesn't come on camera.
Right.
Yeah, but Dale was in the Coast Guard. Why did he join?
Dale was going to join the Army. And he met a fella at the church service. It was around Christmas time, who was in the Coast Guard and sang its praises. And Dale changed his mind and joined the Coast Guard. And then he found out that the fellow he talked to was an officer. So Dale's experience was a lot different.
A lot different. He was an enlisted guy. He was an electronics technician.
Yes.
He was in the Coast Guard right around the time, I think he joined right when Dennis Randall joined, 1973. Or so
72, 73, around
72, 73. Yeah. And he did like cryptanalysis. He did
eventually, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, he started on deck force. He was on Chase out of Boston. Then he went to New York and I think San Francisco, San Diego. Those were his schools. And then by the time he got to Seattle, he was an electronics technician, and he is a plank owner on Polar Star.
On Polar Star, plank owner, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and he has lots and lots of stories. And one thing that I learned from Dale, and Dale and I roomed together a couple times, both on our trip to Vietnam and on our trip to Europe when we did the same tour that we're going on in 3 weeks in 2018. One thing I learned from Dale was that in the Coast Guard, and I think it's because the boats are so small, the crews are so small, and the Coast Guard itself is small, that you have to learn to do a lot of different things in the Coast Guard. So you need to, if you're a cryptologist, you need to know how to repair equipment, and you need to know how to. You know, you become a polymath, very good at a lot of things.
Yes, Dale's even cooked.
And he even cooked. How about that? Well, give Dale my best and tell him I'll buy him a beer when he's fully recovered.
Oh, he'll be there in a second.
Okay, very good, very good. Can I ask, was anyone, before I go to Mike Vanish, was anybody here at one of those remote Loran stations? I'm curious about that duty. Loran, Mike, you were not. See, I thought you had to, but Mike might be, you were probably post Loran service, right?
Yeah, well, I was tail end, so I went in 92. So I think there were still some operational Loran stations. The only thing I really did on them is when I was in the Great Lakes, the Coast Guard kind of got smacked on the wrist because the environmental movement was getting into full swing, and we had dumped a lot of batteries that fed those Loran stations just kind of into the water.
Oh,
Over a
yeah.
long period of time. And I worked in some of the recoveries. I actually was on a Coast Guard cutter Sundew, a buoy tender up in on Lake Superior for 3 months one summer. We recovered like 8,000 batteries. So you know, I was kind of at the beginning of the tail end, like you said. They were getting away from operational Lorans and lighthouses altogether. But you know, we were kind of being in the M field, the marine safety field. I didn't operationally run a Loran, but I came in and did cleanup of some of them. So
Okay, could you describe to people what a Loran is? Because I actually don't even know what it stands for. Long range, something, something.
yeah, aid to navigation. So basically, somebody that was operational, I might know more about the exactly how the functioning of it, but it was basically the aid ship navigation and basically protect ships at sea, pretty much. Worked in conjunction with the lighthouses. It was a whole system.
So, and these were global. They were spread out around the world in remote places, and they had to be tended. I guess the batteries had to be placed, they had to be maintained. So, for example, I believe there was a Loran station on Iwo Jima, in the 1960s and 70s, and which is an uninhabited island, but you'd have to have some Coast Guardsmen there, right, year round to tend to them.
Yeah, there was, I mean, and anybody, like I said, I just know through second and third hand stories from some of the older timers when I was brand new, just, the isolation of it, the nature of the duty, it's like the same as the lighthouse keepers, just it took a lot of fortitude and a lot of resilience.
Yes.
Climate-wise, isolation-wise, that kind of thing, yeah.
Absolutely it would. And I'm so curious about that because people are put through special training to see if they could survive, say, a submarine, an extreme environment. But being on an island with, 15 or 20 or 25 other people for a year, that's a pretty extreme experience. I think Ida May, I could be wrong. I think Dale told me that one of the reasons he got out of the Coast Guard is he knew he would have to do a year at a remote Loran location. And he just thought like, I'll get out before I have to do that. I think that's what he told me. I could be wrong. So that wasn't a thing, Mike, when you were in 92.
Yeah. So no, like I said, my era was, and just to kind of amalgamate and compress a little bit. So, I came in after Desert Storm, and I had a good friend that was in the Navy. So, in fact, a little story with him, we were in his, typical sailor. We're the same age exactly. I mean, we actually had the same birthday, which is another sub thing to it. But he went he was stationed on John F. Kennedy in Norfolk, and he was home on one of his first leaves. And we're driving, and he did the typical. He went out to sea on a 6-month cruise, came back, and showed up at my house at 8 o'clock in the morning with a Firebird. Went and bought a brand new car with his money he saved on late life deployment. 19 years old. But I mean, but how it impacted me is we were driving around. He had 2 weeks leave, and we were about 3 days into it. Doing a normal 19-year-old thing, drinking and having a good time, seeing all our friends. And I'll never forget it. Like they say, the flashball memories. We're coming along across this little bridge in the little hometown he was from, Carnegie, and there was an announcement on the radio, and it said, we fired Tomahawk missiles, and the Gulf War has begun. And he just got real quiet. And he said, I got to drop you off. I got to get back. And I just remember it was like silence, and I knew what he meant. And he just took me home, and I said, be safe and good luck, man. And he went back, and he went off. So, but I mean, I think that kind of started a little bit of, I'm a 19-year-old guy, and I wasn't in, and that kind of typical story. I was a college graduate, or I think I was a junior at the time, maybe 1 year away from graduating. So, in the next year or two, I kind of looked around and finally got my degree and didn't have a whole lot of options, at that time. A friend of mine actually looked into the Coast Guard, and it was really weird. He called me one morning. He and I were working these really stupid with college degree, low paying jobs and trying to figure out what our destinies were in this world. And he called me, he said, I know you're interested in the environment, and, you're talking about some different things you might want to pursue. Do you know the Coast Guard kind of like, they have environmental careers? And I said, well, I kind of might have known that, but what's your point? He said, well, I'm going to go take the test, the ASVAB test.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you know how. I said, okay, well, you let me know how that goes for you. Well, he calls me 2 days later. It's pouring down rain about 9 o'clock in the morning. He goes, my car won't start. Will you take me to take this test? And I said, yeah, Dan, no problem. So I drove him there, and the recruiter sees me sitting in a couch, and he comes out and he says, what's your deal? And I said, well, I drove my friend here. He goes, you healthy? I said, yeah. He said, get in there and take the test with him. And I swear this is not an embellished story. He failed it miserably, and I got a really good score on it. And the recruiter
You are kidding me.
my door down for like weeks. And before you know it, I had my left hand on a Bible and my right hand in the air, and I was next to this fake waxy plant in a recruiter's office, and I was going in.
So the lesson is never sit on the couch in a recruiter's office.
Never be somewhere where, you didn't have intentions to be, because you'll get drawn into a whole life-changing experience.
Isn't that, and it truly did change your life. How many years did you put in the Coast Guard?
I did 23 and a half.
23 and a half, and you retired at what rank?
Commander.
A commander, which is the equivalent in the Army?
Lieutenant Colonel.
It's a lieutenant colonel. Holy mackerel. And what was the focus of your career? I'm sure you did many different jobs, but what was your rating, as they would say?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, it was almost like the tale of 200%, different worlds. The first 9.5, 10 years, I went in under the environmental program. So if you remember, 1989 was Exxon Valdez incident. And the government's, beautiful in that they react, right, instead of, be proactive. So they reacted by dumping a bunch of money into the Coast Guard to fund officer billets to, do marine environmental response is what they called it. So I was in the Coast Guard's basically two different worlds, the M world and the O world, the operational ship driver and shipboard world. I was on the other side. I was on the marine safety world. So I did a lot of, like Jim was saying, I inspected steel and chemical facilities along the rivers and lakes. I regulated the boating community and all the tankers and freighters. That was the whole first 9 years of my career. Then when 9/11 happened, I woke up the next day and they're like, yeah, that stuff's all kind of important, but let somebody else do that. We need people in the port security field. So for the next 15 years of my career, it was all training and focus on being ready to handle the new reality post 9/11.
So that was it. So 9/11 changed everything for you.
9/11 changed my whole, and actually I would honestly say, looking back, I liked what I do in what I did in the environmental field. And I still, I guess for lack of a better word, dabbled in it. We still had in the marine safety units I was stationed at, we still did those things, but now we had a core group of people, like Jim Jones said, he and I worked together in Pittsburgh after 9/11. We basically had a whole other focus kind of melded into that office, which was port security and anti-terrorism.
So
now we were looking at, we weren't just looking at, hey, ship driver, don't wreck and don't spill any chemicals into the water. Now we were worried about protecting them in their travel, protecting the oil facilities, make sure nobody sabotaged them, that whole kind of thing. So, and that's what Jimmy and I were down in Port Arthur doing after 9/11. We went down there to do, you see the boat with the guns. Coast Guard got furnished with a bunch of fast and heavily armed boats after 9/11 for both the coastal and the inland waterways. And they needed people to man and train those boats. And they, so that's what Jimmy was down in Port Arthur. He was a chief. He was training on the boats and also the port security aspect of all the younger, guys and women that came in the Coast Guard. Quite honestly, a lot of them hadn't handled firearms, even a pistol, in their whole Coast Guard career, because they weren't necessarily authorized, or our mission didn't really include in the inland rivers, especially from North Dakota and the Great Lakes all the way down through the middle of the country. That was all local law enforcement and local sheriff's departments. That's kind of like a little not well kept, and a lot of people don't know it's secret. For about 20 years, the Coast Guard really didn't do a whole lot of law enforcement on the inland rivers. And then all of a sudden, we're being asked to do that all day long. And we didn't really have the competency or the training in a core level. So it took us a number of years post 9/11 to build that back up.
Isn't that amazing? And would you say it has it now?
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely has it now. Yeah, we definitely grew into that new suit of clothes, I guess I would say. Yeah.
Mike, we had a breakfast, I remember at Pitt, at the University of Pittsburgh years ago. And there was a man there, a Coast Guard veteran, who said that he served in Iraq. And somebody came up to him, and I can't say he challenged this Coast Guard vet, but he said something like, how could you have been in Iraq if you were in the Coast Guard? Coast Guard wasn't in Iraq. And of course this man was in Iraq, and the Coast Guard was in Iraq. There weren't many, but they were there. And just like Vietnam, they were there. Just like World War II, they were there. Does it ever irk you when people like me say, oh, Coast Guard, what did they do in World War II?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, so as far as like Iraq and Afghanistan, so I won't talk about anything I don't know about. That's always dangerous. But I know we had, intelligence officers, we had ordnance training teams, we had weapons training teams. So we had a lot of people over there in those kind of roles. Whether or not we ever were on the tail end of some combat missions, I'm 100% sure we were. Whether we were officially listed as a complement of part of that combat unit, I can guarantee that we were dragged along and because of necessity, brought into those situations a lot. And a lot of people could, like I said, can attest to that more than me. But my own role, I guess my story would be, I went to Port Arthur and Beaumont, Corpus Christi, Texas, and then New Orleans, Louisiana. So I had 3 deployments between 2001 and 2006. And, they all had to do with a pretty significant role. Like I said, in Port Arthur and Baytown and Houston, Beaumont, just like Jimmy, that was the lifeblood of our petrochemical industry. If they would have attacked that, we would have been big time.
That's right.
So, that was a serious mission, and we all took it serious. And then when I went to New Orleans, I was actually in charge of what we call the OMT, the Outload Management Team. And I actually got all of the Marines, Army personnel, everybody from 14 different forts, west and east of the Mississippi, were all coming to 3 major southeastern United States ports to ship out from. So I was communicating with colonels and 1-stars and getting all those people from the railheads to the port so that they could get on the 1,000-foot transport ships. And, I had a 3-star admiral in, New Orleans that worked 2 floors up from me. And like, he'd see me every morning going back, into the CIC. It was basically just the information center. And we'd be working 12-hour shifts, and he would look at me and he'd be like, everybody and every bullet's going to get there today, Mike, right? And I'm like, yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's like I wasn't in a combat role, but I 100% felt the weight of the situation and 100% knew what pressure was on me and what expectations were on me. I was not going to screw up.
Isn't that, you stated, I think, so well, the role of the military, even when it's not the tip of the spear, but, part of the spear. The middle, the rear part of the spear. Let's get to the brass tacks here. How good of a swimmer are you, Mike?
So that's an interesting thing. I think somebody told you this, must have prepped you for this. So not a great one. So when I went to OCS, I was, I could stay off the wall for a lap or two, and then I just sunk like a rock. I was, pretty dense, pretty muscular. I was never just a great swimmer. So they throw you into this program where you have to go every night and sort of like, you have to train. And I did it. And it was kind of hard because like, not that it was hard enough because I wasn't a great swimmer, but also more the time demand. You already have 18 hours of your day accounted for. Now you're putting another 45 minutes when everybody else, that's their little bit of downtime, mental wise and physical wise. And I'm going to the pool on top of that. So it was like Groundhog Day. I mean, literally we'd get lights out and I never felt the sensation of sleeping. I just felt reveille the next second. It was just like this for, so, then I got through it. I learned how to swim better, but it's funny, like to this day, at 58 years old, family, friends, whatever, most of them know me well enough to know it. But if we go out on a boat or we're swimming with some people that don't know me, they're like, oh, Mike's in a Coast Guard, he can save me. I'm like, trust me.
Yeah.
I'll do my best because I know you well enough and I care about you. I play it out. But do your best to save yourself. I'll do what I can, but I'll make it out. I'm gonna do what I can for you. Don't count on me.
So Barb Smith, what did you mean? NQS non-qualified swimmer. What does that mean? Bob.
In boot camp, you had to swim, so to speak, which I did, and I swam too much and I got thrown out of the pool because I disobeyed the guy that told me what to do. Anyway, non-qualified swimmers would go back maybe 3 or 4 times to the pool, and a lot of them didn't get qualified. They just they didn't get qualified, period. But they still stayed in the Navy. So
but they graduated boot camp though.
Yes.
Yes, see, I mean, I honestly thought to this day, I mean, I don't know how true it was because I did finally, so, you have to take the American Red Cross life-saving swimming test. And it's to drop the brick in the water, and you have to dive from the high dive, cross and cover. You have to get yourself up without any, you have to bob and get to the side without any help, the whole thing. But I did all that, and I was, okay at it. I survived it. But my tough thing was just the lap swimming. Just, I didn't have a good stroke. And so you have to do 18 laps in 12 minutes. So when it was all said and done, I ended up doing 22. And I honestly, to this day, call that one of my biggest accomplishments because I literally went from a rock that maybe would have made 1.5. And I mean, I even tried to train a little bit before I went in. I went to the YMCA in Pittsburgh, and I mean, I got to myself to at least, I don't know, I survived it, but we were told up and down, you don't pass this, you are not making it out of this school. So, I mean, like I said, I took it as gospel. I don't know that anybody flunked out for swimming, but I took it seriously that if I don't pass this test, I'm not making it. And I didn't want to look back and say I failed. So it
was sheer determination.
It was sheer will. It was sheer will.
You are not going to fail. Chad Riddle.
He just brought back a memory from officer school in Newport, Rhode Island. We had to jump off the 16-foot dive twice.
Wow.
So all we had to do, jump off and come back up. Well, we had one young fella of Asian extraction. I won't say his name, but I remember it to this day. He jumped in and he assumed the fetal position. And he was at the bottom of the pool like a rock. Like you said, and we had guys stationed in the water in case this happened. And somebody went down, grabbed him by the hair, and pulled him up. And that week at the company meeting, somebody lugged out a rock that weighed about 50 pounds and gave it to him. It was called the Rock Award. And he had to carry it until
he had to carry it.
But he did do it a second time, but he made it up. I guess he figured out what to do, but there was still a ring of lifeguards around to make sure he didn't do the same thing, because we might have lost him.
I want to ask Bob von Bargen to just remind us again of what the Coast Guard is doing around the world. You are very much on top of this, Bob. You said as we speak, Coast Guardsmen are managing ports in the Persian Gulf.
Coast Guardsmen are stationed around the world. And as you several people have said, and as you said, it irks me when I hear these people say, assume that the Coast Guardsmen are just driving up and down the Jersey Shore and aren't doing anything other than that. when they had when in the Iraq period, the Fort Dix had a training school. It was an immersive situation where they actually had a camp, and the camp would be under attack, and they lived under actual wartime conditions. And Coast Guardsmen went through there regularly before they went over for their duties over in the Persian Gulf.
Wow, I never heard any of that, Bob. Thank you very much. And you, as an Air Force navigator, you know about Loran, right? Did you rely on Loran as a navigator?
Yeah, we had Loran, the early Loran, which were based on a cathode ray tube. Those were interesting. You really had to be very creative to make those things work. The problem with Loran is that it's influenced with atmospheric conditions. And so when you get further away from the stations, you get further out into the ocean. What happens with the signal is that the signal comes out, and if you can picture the signal coming out and hitting the ionosphere and bouncing off the ionosphere and bouncing back down to the surface of the ocean and then bouncing up again. Well, every time it makes that bounce, it makes a blip on the oscilloscope there. And so the question is, what are you looking at? It's like looking at a sea of grass. Then they got better as it went along. In the 141, we had a wonderful Loran set. It was designed for submarines, and when you've got it into cirrus clouds, it didn't work. But ultimately, the equipment got better. As the equipment got better, it put the navigator out of work and he was out of a job.
Right, right. I want to remind people we'll be back next Monday. We do this program every Monday night. Persian Gulf War was mentioned. We're going to be back Monday night, August 11th, and we're going to be kind of commemorating the 35th anniversary of Desert Shield. If you can imagine, it's been 35 years already. So we would love to have people who served in the Persian Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, come and share their stories. We're going to have somebody from the National Desert Storm Memorial, which is being built in Washington, D.C. They're going to give us an update on how the memorial is going, the construction is going. And we want people from different branches of service to talk about their experiences. So again, a week from tonight, that's Monday, August 11th at 7 p.m. This is our quarterly magazine. If we have anybody here like Lewis McDonald, like Dennis, who don't get BBC Magazine, and Lewis, Dennis, please don't sign off without me getting your contact information, because I want to be able to contact you again so that you could come on again. And I also want to make sure you get this magazine. We send this out free of charge every quarter to about 12,000 people around the country. And this is our summer issue. It focuses on VJ Day, the 80th anniversary. And boy, have I gotten great responses to this issue. It's an issue that kind of looks at VJ Day from a historical perspective, but also always what the Veterans Breakfast Club is always about are the stories, are the first person stories from people who were there. And we share those also in the issue. We want to thank UPMC for Life, which is a sponsor of this program. They can help you save money and make better choices for your Medicare plan. You could go and see that their plan options. They especially have plans that are made for veterans by veterans. And you could check out your options at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. Let me just say, I'm a historian, so I'm interested in the Coast Guard, and I would make the argument that when this country was founded, the Coast Guard was by far the most important branch of service. There was not a Navy. There was no Navy after the American Revolution. It was disbanded. The Navy would not be reinstituted until 1794. There was hardly an army. There were maybe 85 soldiers in the whole country, and maybe 2 active forts. West Point was one, and Fort Pitt was another. Here's the guy who founded the Coast Guard. You may recognize him. There's a remarkably good picture of him, considering that he died in 1804. But Alexander Hamilton was the founder of the Navy. And if you know anything about Alexander Hamilton, our first Secretary of the Treasury, he was all about the money. He was all about making the United States of America a sound financial country. And so he knew that the only way that this country could get revenue was through tariffs, import duties. And the only way they could prevent people from smuggling things in without paying those tariffs was to have a revenue cutter service that would patrol the coast and would make sure that smugglers didn't smuggle things in. So that's why the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service was so important. It was the basis of our economy, the basis of our government. And that's why the biggest buildings in our young American Republic, the most ornate, were the custom houses. This is where the money was collected. And when you brought a ship into port in the United States in the 19th century, before you unloaded anything, a custom official came on board, saw exactly what you were carrying, and gave you a tax bill that had to be paid right on the spot before you unloaded anything. So the government got its cut, its revenue, and this is when the federal income tax was unconstitutional. It would take a constitutional amendment in 1913, the 16th Amendment, to change our tariff system and the federal government would start collecting revenue through income tax. Then in 1915 and then again in the 1930s, the U.S. Life Saving Service was folded into the Revenue Cutter Service, and the United States Coast Guard was born. The Coast Guard, as we know, played a role in World War II. Here they are, the Escanaba rescuing Dorchester survivors, the famous Four Chaplains disaster of February 3rd, 1943. As was mentioned, the landings at Omaha Beach was a Coast Guard operation. Here are Marines saluting the Coast Guard in Guam. And here is the only Coast Guard, I believe he's the only Coast Guard recipient of the Medal of Honor. This is Douglas Munro, and this is for actions that he did on Guadalcanal in 1942. So that's a little bit of the history of the Coast Guard. I just wanted to squeeze that in because I can't help myself. Let's open it up to questions, comments. Al Smith, I think you had some questions about Guadalcanal and Douglas Munro and the Coast Guard, if people know what the role of the Coast Guard was in the battle.
I didn't, and that was such a horrific battle. I was just curious, where did they end up, the Coast Guard, on the beach or offshore, and how did that gentleman end up with a Medal of Honor? And also to Bob Von Bargen, my question, I was going to ask the question, has the Coast Guard ever lost any ships? I wasn't referring to the wartime. I was referring to they go out so often on very dangerous rescue missions in terrible seas. And do they always seem to come back? I mean, they put themselves, their lives in danger with what they're doing. Have they ever lost a ship that way?
So have they ever
lost ships? They've lost ships. They've lost helicopters at I can remember, I don't know whether some of the other guys who are more current than I am, they told us at Cape May, and they reiterated it regularly. You had to go out. You didn't have to come back, but you had to go out. And when things got tough, there were no excuses. You went and you did it. And I think the Coast Guard has proven that to be a way of doing business.
One Coast Guard veteran told me that what he was proudest of was that, and this is Francis Hines, the late Francis Hines, who died fairly recently. He said, the Coast Guard is the only branch of service that's tasked with saving lives rather than taking them. And he was very proud of that and really thought that distinguished it from the other branches of service. Ida Mae, do you happen to know the full story or the bigger story of Douglas Munro? I know Dale has shared the story with me. I don't know if it's rubbed off on you or not.
I understand that he was helping Marines being taken off the island. They were under attack, and he positioned himself between them and some gunfire and he was injured, and his last words were, "Did we get them all off?"
And you could see how young he was.
Yes.
Man, oh man.
And when Dale was in the Coast Guard, they still told them, "You have to go out, but you don't have to come back."
Exactly.
So that's still carried on as far as I know.
Got it. That's wonderful. Do we have any other comments or questions from the group? Any other stories? Jimmy has stories. Lewis, how did you find out about us, Lewis McDonald?
The Coast Guard had the Coast Guard.
Hey, Jimmy, could you hold on just a second? I want to, Lewis, how did you find out about the Veterans Breakfast Club in this program tonight?
My cousin, who was a donut dolly in Vietnam, contacted me about an hour and a half ago and told me that it was going to be on and thought I'd enjoy it. And so I am so happy she contacted me. And
who's your cousin?
Joyce Dinky. And
oh, how great.
She speaks at a lot of veterans meetings and represents the Donut Dollies, and they just had a big great gathering, I think, in Seattle.
Did you ever see a Donut Dolly in Vietnam?
Never did.
No, they didn't go near the Coast Guard guys. No way.
They were in country going from the different fire bases and things
right.
like that.
How great. So Lewis, I'm so grateful that you joined us. And Dennis Randall, you have not joined us before, I don't believe, have you?
No, actually, I had not. My wife, who's an Army veteran, is working for a company. She does actually now she's a producer for a company that does veterans, largely documentaries.
Oh, okay.
And her name is Karen Brennan, and she was and anyhow she's a member, and she gets the monthly, and she said, "Oh, you should go to this one."
Oh, good. That's great. That's great. And Carlsbad, how close is Carlsbad to Santa Monica?
It's a lot closer to San Diego.
Okay, closer to San Diego.
Yeah. We're about a 20-minute drive to San Diego.
Okay, very good. Jimmy, I interrupted you. You were going to tell a story about Vietnam?
Yes, we had Coast Guard casualties over in Vietnam. It was an 82 footer over there that actually got fired upon by the Air Force, and it's a long story. You have to read it, but they lost quite a few of their men, and some got injured. It was friendly fire in the middle of the night, and the 82 footer, I think it was called a Point Comfort or a Point Welcome. I always get them two mixed up, but yeah, they were fired upon by the Air Force. It got mixed up with the Air Force thinking that it was the Viet Cong sampan or whatever the whole story was. I gotta sit down and read that story someday, because there's a big reason why that happened, and it just didn't 1, 2, 3. It happened. There's a long story of that.
A long story of friendly fire, Air Force on a Coast Guard. Was it a Coast Guard patrol boat?
It was an 82-foot patrol boat, yes.
Okay.
The 82-foot patrol boats and the Navy swift boats basically did the same duties up and along the rivers in Vietnam.
Now, you said kind of offhandedly that you fired the first shot off the Barataria.
Yes.
Do you mean the first shot fired in the Vietnam War from that ship?
No. When we went to Vietnam, the Coast Guard sent 5 Coast Guard cutters over there. They were all 311-foot cutters. So we were one of the first 5. There was a Coast Guard cutter Barataria, Coast Guard cutter Half Moon, Coast Guard cutter Bering Strait, Coast Guard cutter Yakutat, and the Gresham. So when we got over to Vietnam, we got sent out different periods. And we were the first ones to go out on patrol in May of 1967, and we got requested a fire support from the Army. So we were the very first Coast Guard Squadron 3. See, that's where the mix-up gets construed. That there was a Squadron 1, which was 82 footers, and the Squadron 3 was the Barataria. That was the Barataria returning from Vietnam.
Correct.
1968, we actually left the ship in Alameda, California, and we all flew back to Portland, got reassigned. And the Coast Guard cutter Dexter crew from Barataria, they were, the Dexter crew was getting decommissioned, and they took over the Barataria.
So this is the Barataria. This is your ship. However, you were not on it when this picture was taken.
What's that?
You were not on this ship when the picture was taken.
Yes, I was. We were in San Francisco Harbor.
Oh, you were? Okay. So you were on this, you're in this picture somewhere.
We just passed under the Golden Gate Bridge, and I have a picture of us going right underneath the bridge, and I can send it to you if you want. But anyway, yeah, we pulled in, then we went by Alcatraz Island, went to Alameda, and then that's where we tied up, and then we just spent a couple of days in Barataria, and we took all our stuff off, and we flew back on a Coast Guard C-130 to Portland, Maine. And that ship stayed out on the West Coast for a couple more months. And unfortunately, on the Barataria, they had an engine room fire off the Aleutian Islands. And that's what caused the demise of the Barataria. They ended up decommissioning it and sold for scrap to a company in in Vancouver, British Columbia.
So the Barataria was a World War II vintage.
Yes, it was a seaplane tender.
A seaplane tender. Okay.
It was SS Barataria AV-33. That was the number one that was in the Navy.
Right.
And there's a Navy website. I got into it one time. It had the names of all the high endurance seaplane tenders that got transferred over to the Coast Guard. And our number was the AV-33. And then when they transferred it to the Coast Guard, it was the AVP 381, and they changed to the WHEC 381, which means Coast Guard High Endurance Cutter.
What a great conversation tonight, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Jimmy. It's good to see you again. I'm really thrilled. What?
We have a 30-minute Coast Guard career on YouTube. Anybody wants to watch it, all you got to do is Google Chief Petty Officer James Jones. It'll come up.
Google Chief Petty Officer James Jones, and you could watch a 30-minute video about the career of Jimmy Jones.
It's a 30-year career in 30 minutes.
30, yeah.
Mike watched at least once.
Thank you. It's good to see you again, Jimmy. Mike, I'm so grateful that you were able to join us tonight.
Say hi to Larry.
You're saying hi to your brother, Larry Jones. Lewis and Dennis, thank you for joining us. Man, what a wonderful conversation. We covered a lot of ground, and we didn't even kind of talk about how the Coast Guard gets the Navy hand-me-downs and how you deal with that. So that was, not many slurs against the Navy. That was good. I'm grateful for everybody joining us. I hope to see you on Thursday night when we do Escape from Dachau, and then next Monday when we talk Desert Storm and Desert Shield. And again, I just want to say, Lewis and Dennis, please do email me if you can, Todd, TODD at veteransbreakfastclub.org. I want to make sure that I have your contact information for future programs. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you. Take care, everybody.